Hi, I'm Catherine Gomez. I belong to a Christian RTO called Inspire College, and I am writing a learning program for this college, and this is a real stakeholder. This is the principal of Inspire College, Pastor Adam Boyes, and he is going to be reviewing the learning program today. And we're not actually role playing. I've actually reviewed this learning program for our purposes. And so this is going to be a real review as well as my assessment. So previously, Pastor Adam, we've had provide personal leadership clustered with Undertake project work. Yeah. So, and we've spoken about how they might work well as standalone subjects. Yeah. And so what we've actually done is I've taken the strategy to be just so we're only adding 1 hour to term 1 of our curriculum. Yeah. I've just made it a 10 weekly 1 hour sessions. And of course, we've got the 50 hours of fieldwork experience that come with this. So in our classrooms, we'll be teaching and learning the theory behind their 50 hours of fieldwork experience. Now, the purpose of the learning program is it describes all the skills and the knowledge that's required to display high levels of personal leadership and be a role model within the work, or in our case, ministry environment. It teaches individuals how to conduct themselves, take initiatives to influence, assist and guide others, and effectively manage their own roles and responsibilities at the same time. Yep. Okay, so our target group will be anyone who's already in a leadership position or aims to be in a leadership.
Yeah, that's right. They don't have to be active in it currently, but that's the goal.
So they'll be aiming to be in leadership. And as with, we are delivering most of our content face-to-face, so I've just made it a face-to-face, continuing the same stream. But obviously we've got the short-term goal of getting all of our content online.
Yeah, recorded.
So at one point this will be recorded. Okay, so our assessments would obviously include the 50 hours of the field work.
Yeah, evidencing that somehow, yeah.
Yes, so then the assessments are really the evidence of that. We've got a report on the fieldwork experience, which is some questions, and we've got some activities as well in there. Yeah. And then we've actually got the logbook that logs those 50 hours. Sure. And of course the supervisor report on those. Yep. So that makes up all of our assessment components.
Yeah, you should hopefully cover the rules of evidence, principles of assessment, all that jazz.
Yes, and so I've broken up the program into the 1 hour sessions, including the assessments, and what I've done there is I've done the benchmark mapping, and we have covered all of in the assessments, it does cover all the performance criteria. Yep. And in all of our sessions we'll be covering all of the performance evidence and the knowledge evidences, and I've mapped them out here on the slides for us. And so I thought I'd start with, obviously we have to start with an introduction for our first session. And that will just be an overview of the levels of leadership that we'll be going through. Yeah. It will be about the principle-based leadership that we teach. And of course we have to start with WHS and talk about any risk factors and reporting incidences and doing things like that. We will talk about the assessments, because obviously they would need to be logging any field work right from the beginning. And because that's the big part of the assessment, we'll be giving them the assessments from the word go kind of thing. So I thought just to start with, of course, every one of our sessions will include our student notes, but we will also have in the first one, we would include a PowerPoint slide, just to give them a visual, help them understand, you know, from the beginning, where we're going with each session. So I thought about using a PowerPoint slide for that, and helping them understand how we would run the whole course.
Yeah, and how it all interrelates.
Yes, so I thought that would be a good way to start. And then we'd go, I would just, because it's only 1 hour per session, and we have the 4 different levels of leadership, I thought we would cover 2, we would take 2 sessions to cover each level. So in our second session, we'll be doing personal leadership theory, the part A of that, and we would be doing the spiritual centered principles, inside out change, and our resources will be the student notes, and obviously because we contextualise from a biblical standpoint, our resource would be the Bible.
Yeah, cool.
And with part 2 of that in our third session, we're covering character and competency, and I found a YouTube video that John Maxwell does.
Oh, yeah.
That called Developing the Leader Within You.
Right.
And that's about 20 minutes, which gives us that, 40 minutes of discussion time after that.
Yeah, there's also a book called The Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey Jr., so the son of the man who wrote Seven Habits. And he talks about building trust through character and competency, character being the underground stuff. If you've got a tree that is producing fruit, all that kind of thing, character is the root system that's underneath. You can't see it, but it's important. Integrity and intention. And then the competency stuff is your capabilities and results.
Oh,
and
so that sounds like a good resource too.
A brilliant book, yeah.
Okay, good. So obviously you're recommending that one?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, good. So then in our next 2 sessions we'd have interpersonal leadership theory, and so the first one of course being session 4, and I would use the student notes again there, and the other resource that I found there was another YouTube video done by Vanessa Van Edwards, and she does a really good video on interpersonal leadership. So I thought of using that. With our second session of interpersonal leadership, I was looking at the student notes and found that there were in this session, there's quite a few discussion points. So I thought I would use those discussion points as a resource, and that we would sort of thresh out the points that are in the student notes. And then next in our session 6, we would be starting the managerial level of leadership. And the first one talks about empowerment. So the leaders empowering those that they are leading. So, and I thought that the points in the student notes were great points for role play. So that is a resource that I would like to use in that session. And then in the next session we talk about team development in session 7. And
that's the storming, norming, performing one?
That's right. And so I thought they were really good discussion points. So we would use the student notes and just get into discussion about those points. And in session 8 we get into organisational leadership. And I thought with that one we could do an actual organisational chart from our organisation's perspective, and also just a PowerPoint slide that had the structure of a typical organisational level of leadership that we have in our notes. So that way they have a visual of how that all works. And we would use the student notes as well as for the resource. And of course the last session of organisational level of leadership talks about communication. So obviously with communication I think it's a really good thing to practice. So I thought we'd use role play in that one as well. Okay, so that brings us down to our last session, and I just thought obviously we want to do a review of all of this content. So I thought it would be a great time to get out the report on the fieldwork experience, and that way they're filling in and we're reviewing at the same time.
Yep, sounds good.
And answering any questions that they may have. And I thought that would be a good, solid way to finish off the 10 sessions.
Yep, excellent.
Okay. So,
looks like we know who's running this one next year.
well, I'd like to have that experience.
Indeed.
So, of course, our assessment methods would be the field work, as we've spoken about before, and it would be basically reporting on that field work. So we've got the field work report, the logbook, and the actual supervisor who is supervising the field work that the student's doing.
Yep.
They're reporting on that as well. So that'd be, if they tick all the boxes, then that would be enough to show performance criteria.
Yeah.
In all of those areas.
Yeah.
And of course, the learning, the literacy, learning and numeracy requirement would be that they have to be able to process all of those instructions. They have to understand and identify all of those concepts and participate. There is quite a bit of class discussion, so they need to be able to participate in that.
Yep.
They, of course, they have to be able to read and understand the student notes and be clear on all the points we have there. Their writing, they have to be able to report on all of their field work experience, so they need to have that, able to be able to write that. And oral communication, obviously, they have to participate in the class discussion, and they have to be able to sort of raise some really good questions in the class. We want them to be thinking about it and raising some questions. Numeracy, of course, we've got just it's very basic. They need to be able to refer to the Bible references that we refer to. And of course able to count, because they have to count up their 50 hours of fieldwork experience.
Yeah, I'd just say that as well. They also need numeracy skills in any leadership setting. We're always counting things. How many people have come along? How many dollars have been spent? What's our budgets for different things? Like they need that numeracy skills as well. It's not just finding the Bible stuff. It's also they need to, if they're in any kind of leadership position, they've got to be able to understand how to count. I know it seems elementary, but they do need to know how to do that. And they also need to understand a bit of how benchmarking works. How do we compare this year's numbers compared to last year's numbers or last week's numbers or whatever? That's a huge part of what we do.
Okay, so that would be covered in the collecting and analysing numerical data?
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, so for our resources that we would need, I've put down, obviously we need the student notes, and I see that they've been recently updated, and I've read through and I can see they're pretty good quality, so I think they can stay as is, as a resource. We've also got the existing logbooks and the existing fieldwork supervisor reports, but we've both had a look at them, and I think we both agree that they do need some updating.
They need some attention.
Yes, and we have put a day in our diary to update those logbooks, so that they'll be the resources that we needed. And obviously we're going to be using the YouTube videos as well, and now we may be also using that book from Stephen Covey, and that's already an existing resource.
You get like a PDF that just outlines 13 different behaviours that inspire trust. And so they don't necessarily have to read the whole book, though it's a great thing to do. There's 13 key behaviours that he talks about in there that are pretty good. I've noticed in your resource list that there's no provision for a coffee machine in there. So it might be a resource needed for the class to be a coffee machine, but okay, no, it's fine.
We won't run with it this time.
Ask your boss, hang on.
If you want, I'll update that.
Yes, okay. Coffee makes everything better.
Yes, it sure does. So safety considerations, obviously we're still in the COVID season. So I've put that one of the risks will be contracting any contagious illnesses. So obviously any students, so the way we control that would be any students kind of presenting with any flu-like symptoms will be sent home straight away.
Yeah.
And that would especially,
request not come in the first place.
that's right, and that would especially cover fever, and coughs would be the particular one. And of course we've got the new rule of being seated 1.5 metres away from each other.
Yeah.
And we've got the hand sanitizer being used on entry as they enter each class. And of course we're having the desk wipe downs between each session as well.
Yeah. I'll just say here, looking at the resources part, because you're talking about a practical unit, there's only listed here the student notes, the paper resources, but as part of our resource review report that we do as the college, we also need to have mentioned in there that you've got the resource of the classroom, you've got the resource of, there is Wi-Fi that's provided in there. You also need actual departments to serve in, because it is a practical unit. You can't deliver that without departments to serve in, which we do have those. And I'll definitely be including those in that as well as part of your learning program that needs to document. Because if we're giving this to another provider, say, hey, you deliver this, and they go, oh, I've got everything I need here. Well, actually, no, you don't. You do need somewhere for your student to serve, to provide that leadership.
Okay, that's fantastic. Okay, I'll be adding that in.
Yep.
Just back to the risks and the controls of any risks. Obviously, we're going to be using electrical equipment, so we're going to have power cords. So I don't want them to be presenting a tripping hazard. Yep. So what I've put in, one of the ways we can control that, of course, is to have the electrical equipment to be as close to the wall as possible. Yep. And just to keep them out of our foot traffic areas. So against the wall, away from anywhere the students are walking over.
Yeah, what we could also put in there is if the students are moving equipment, tables, chairs, that kind of thing. There's a risk assessment that's been undertaken on that to accelerate. So there's a SWIMS for that, a safe work method statement for that. It's all there as well. There's also one for using ladders and stuff too that we have on there. So just again, if they're in their practical component, it's not just a classroom setting, they'll be actually doing things. And so there's also risk assessments that need to be and have been completed for those too.
Okay, good.
Yep.
Thank you. Obviously, as an organisation, we have a policy where obviously if they're doing field work, a lot of times they are working with children and working with youth, so we have it as a requirement that we have to have the working with children's check.
That's right.
And so that's I think apart from that, there's no real requirement as long as they've got the learning and the literacy and the numeracy basic skills.
Yeah, I think the other thing that came up in our meeting the other day, we were mentioning that in addition to the working with children check, we also need to get our students to complete the Safer Churches through ACC. Which is not necessarily related specifically to the unit of competency here, but it is because they are undertaking practical fieldwork stuff in the life of the church. And as an ACC church, like not only do they need to have their working with children check, they also have to have completed the Safer Churches training workshop. That can be online or we can get in someone to do it, but yeah, they do. I've mentioned that in there as well.
Yeah. So that concludes how we've written up the learning program.
Yeah.
So thank you for your attention and thank you.
No worries. No worries.